Hey guys, Shadarek here, and today I have a video going over what trinkets you should run in Mythic Plus. Now, I've mentioned it before, Mythic Plus sims, not really something I'm a fan of. That said, the most right way to do them is definitely doing something like a dungeon route sim, which is where it's a sim going through an actual route that was run through a dungeon and kind of based loosely off that. That said, even with that, looking at the damage dealt on those sims versus what's done in the actual key, there are some pretty large discrepancies, so it's still not going to work one to one. But let's get into it. So I ran a few sims with this. Thank you to Azior from the Demon Hunter Discord for running the original sim on this, and I just joined the dungeon route and went, well, this is a good idea. So, what I have here is 3 different sims. The first sim is just with Astral Antenna, simming all the on-use trinkets. The second one is just with Cursed Stone Idol selected as it sims the highest, but I'll get into that. And this is also using my current character gear and kind of current item level trinkets, not looking at like a full BIS scenario, but I'll still have things to talk about with that. So yeah, the second sim, it's Cursed Stone Idol with all the passive trinkets that are, somewhat usable, and kind of going over how good or not good they are. And third is just every single trinket, none of them locked in together, simmed out together. Of course, the same thing is going to be at the top as on this sim, because that was just also the best combination. So, let's start with the first one. Now, this is, again, antenna is locked in, no matter what, it's an antenna sim. And I did sim with a 10% miss rate on antenna in all of these sims, and it's still BIS, missing 10% of your orbs, which honestly might be a little bit less than gets missed, so I might have to bump that up in the future. But the trinkets that we have on hand, and keep in mind, this is for Eldrachi, so 1.5-minute trinkets are just used on cooldown. They're not used with meta, you don't pair it up. If you are using them on a 2-minute cooldown, at that point, just use Signet. You can't hold these. So, Cursed Stone Idol sims pretty much by far the best. Significant amount ahead on this Dungeon Route sim, and this was for a 17 Ecodome. Now, the downside to Cursed Stone Idol is it's not always going to hit all the mobs perfectly like it does in the sim, and the actual damage effect on Cursed Stone Idol is pretty high now after the significant amount of buffs that it got. But even with that, the usual complaint for Cursed Stone Idol is that it feels really bad to fit into your gameplay. You can't spell Q it, and I don't think you can spell Q abilities out of it either, so it's going to sim a little bit better than it plays, and it's a channel. You can move during the channel, but it is a channel that does cast. So it's something that you're going to have to play and know whether or not it's okay to play with. Personally, I haven't gotten a Cursed Stone Idol to even toy with. However, I do believe in using Nether Prism. Just to go over the other options. Again, Lily is the next highest. It's not really that far behind Cursed Stone Idol, so again, if you don't like the on-use with the channel time, you can just run Lily for Eldrachi as well, but you do need to use these on cooldown on the 1.5 minutes. Signet is a pretty decent option, and then below we have Nether Prism, Perfidious Projector, and Eras's Ritual Forge. Now, with these 3, a few things to talk about. The number 1 is going to be Perfidious Projector. I just don't really recommend running, but it's something you can run if you want to have some fun with, a massive damage burst from the trinket itself. But it's not a particularly good AoE trinket. Eras's Ritual Forge. This was nerfed multiple times, and we were never burst heavy enough to really use this as effectively as other specs anyway, so Ritual Forge is kind of a little bit dead to us in Mythic Plus, in my opinion. It's really not that great. There might be a couple dungeons with a lot of downtime where it might be okay, but definitely not a great option overall. In Raid, I think this has a lot higher value because the 2-minute timer, and with fights like Dementia with downtime, the amount of burst that you gain on this trinket's cooldown, and doing burst into 100% damage amps, which there's 3 of them in this raid tier. There's a lot of use for Eras's Ritual Forge for that, but Mythic Plus kind of hands off. Now there's Nether Prism. Nether Prism actually under sims. significantly. The thing to Nether Prism is it says that the damage is split. However, it isn't. The damage isn't split at all. So, if I go into a log and show what I mean, it's going to be the same damage throughout the entire key, just kind of happening with a little bit of variance based on procs. So it doesn't matter if I proc on a single target, like if I go to Soulscribe, and I crit for 1,000,000. Or if I go to a portion where I'm proccing on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 12 targets, 1.1 million. So despite the text on it saying that it splits with the meteor effect and then gains 30% per enemy, it doesn't. It does the same damage no matter the amount of targets it hits. Every target takes the same. Over a key versus in the sim itself, this leaves a bit of a gap, and that is, on the sim, 1.3% overall, whereas in the actual dungeon itself, it does 2.6. Now, that's not a life-changing amount. Honestly, I expected due to the bug it would be a bit bigger, but an extra 1.3% is enough that even on this sim alone, that brings Nether Prism up above Lily. And when you're playing Nether Prism, I think there's a lot that you can do to be creative with it, to move it around, to use it on more impactful pulls and like larger AoE, and it's not as simple as just press it with your meta and go with that. On top of that, you change your rotation to fit a bunch of Reaverglade bursts into the window with it as well. So considering that, I think Nether Prism is just hands down better than Cursed Stone Idol, and it's way better than it sims for AoE scenarios because of that bug where, you know, at least right here, it's simming at least 1.3% too low, and it should be at 2.1% above Lily. So when it comes down to it, for what to run for on-use trinkets, that is going to be, in my opinion, Nether Prism, then Cursed Stone Idol, then Lily of the Eternal Weave. If you're playing Felsguard, don't play Cursed Stone Idol or Lily. You could play Unyielding Nether Prism, or Raz's Ritual Forge, or Signet. The 2-minute burst is a lot more value for Raz's Ritual Forge. Nether Prism's going to be the best again, but if you don't get it, I'd go for Raz's Ritual Forge or Signet of the Priory. They'll be pretty similar. Next, we have the passive trinkets. So again, I just simmed this using Cursed Stone Idol because I needed a baseline, and I just wanted to look at all the passives. So at the top, even with the miss rate, is going to be Astral Antenna. Next, right below that, is our Karsak Brood. Not really that far behind, honestly. The one thing I will note is I believe in an actual key, there's going to be more downtime than in the sim, and in that downtime, that is where you're not proccing more sack brood eggs, and your eggs are taking to fall off. So I think this is a little bit worse than it sims, probably similar to Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt, but it's pretty okay either way. Now, next is Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt, 0.5% below antenna, a decent option all around, but definitely not like the most recommended. One of the problems is in a sim, the AoE portion of these trinkets is going to hit everything. So stats, I think, are a lot easier to get the value out of versus Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt, which I will say I haven't played with, but I believe the AoE effect from it is not as big as... Basically, it won't perform as well in an actual given key compared to how it does on the sim because the sim's having everything hit. Screams of a Forgotten Sky, this has the same issue, but even more egregious. This death effect just does not perform the way that it sims. So despite the fact that it's up pretty high and it's still not even number one with this, I really do not recommend running Screams of Forgotten Sky Mythic Plus. I think it's a do not use trinket. It's just not worth using. Also, as a small side note for anyone that wants to compare, like, oh, but my Screams of Forgotten Sky is doing way more damage than my Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt. Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt has 6,800 agility. Screams has 1,800 crit. If you look at stat weights, crit is probably about 1.5 times the value of agility at best. So you kind of think of this as equivalent to about 2,400 agility, where this has 6,800. That's something in the range of probably about 3 to 4% damage that is lost just off the base stat. So anytime you have a secondary stat-based trinket, it's not as simple as comparing the damage that those deal. We have Empowering Crystal of Anubicage and Pacemaker pretty close around that range. Same thing. They're pretty good. but overall not exactly the greatest. Antenna is just going to beat everything out. And then Solea's shows up. However, Solea's is higher value than Pacemaker and Empowering Crystal of Anubikaj. The way that the Sims is going to be different depending on your character. You are able to choose at the bottom of rate bots now which stat this is simming as. I simmed it as crit, but crit or mastery typically is going to be good in a dungeon scenario. The thing that's not included is that on top of this, you are giving 283 of a stat to one of your allies. Now, this is not a massive amount. It's something in the range of about 0.2 to 0.3% DPS, but it's enough that it goes ahead of Pacemaker and around or better than Empowering Crystal of Anubikaj, while also not being in any bit RNG based. You just have the stats at all time. I would recommend getting a weak ore to make sure you always have it up, but they did change the quality of life on this by making it a 1 hour buff up from the 30 minutes prior as well. So, not a bad option. Next below that, we have Incorporeal Warp Claw. This is just a damage proc, but it splits on enemies, not an M+ trinket. And then we have Ticking Sack of Terror. Now, this is the same as Screams of the Forgotten Sky. Secondary stat-based trinket. It's going to look like it's doing pretty decent damage, and that's all I can say about it is decent because this doesn't scale up in AoE at all. This trinket is genuinely abhorrently bad in Mythic Plus. Never run this in AoE. It's simply horrible. Taking Sack of Terror is pure single target trinket only. Do not run this in AoE. So, just to recap, for passive trinkets, Antenna is Biss. Next is going to be something in between Sack Brood and Sigil of Cosmic Hunt are pretty good. However, Solea's Secret Technique and Empowering Crystal of Anubikaj, these are all within like 0.2% DPS. They may vary a little bit depending on your character's stats. So all of these are good. Pacemaker is slightly worse than those post-nerf, but again, instead of being like within 0.2%, it's like 0.3 to 0.4% below. A very small number, and any of these trinkets work. So as long as you don't have an antenna, I just recommend running any of Arakar's Sack Brood, Empowering Crystal of Anubikaj, Solea's, or Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt as your passive trinket. Don't run double on use. You're going to run one passive at least. You can also run double passive if you don't want to use an on use. That's perfectly fine. It's going to be less damage, but it's easier to play, less to mess up, and it can perform better if you frequently forget to use your on use trinkets or anything like that. Which gets us into the third section of every trinket simmed together. Now, Antenna and Sack Brood together is actually almost comparable to Antenna with Cursed Stone Idol. Actually pretty competitive. As I mentioned before, though, Sack Brood is going to oversim a bit compared to the value you're actually going to get in a key. So, a little bit lower, but as a double passive option, Antenna and Sack Brood goes kind of hard. And then same thing, if you don't have Antenna, all those other options that I mentioned before are still going to be interchangeable. You can use any of those. And it's really just going to be, when it comes down to it, for on-use trinkets, you're looking at Nether Prism as your number one, and then Cursed Stone Idol or Lily of the Eternal Weave. And then for passives, ideally Antenna. If you can't get Antenna, Sack Brood, Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt, Empowering Crystal of Anubikaj, or Pacemaker. That's really going to be all the options. That's all you do typically need to know about it. So, let me know what you think about this video. Just wanted to do this quick recap because despite the fact that I made my trinket tier list before and talked about this, and I made a gearing guide, and I have the WoW head guide, I am getting asked constantly what trinkets to run in Mythic Plus, and what trinkets to run in Mythic Plus if I don't have Antenna, or if I don't raid, or I don't have Nether Prism, what can I use instead? So I just wanted to put this out there as everything that you can use, and what's good. Now, if you enjoy this kind of content, I'd appreciate if you follow my channel so you can keep up to date with Havoc Demon Hunter and World of Warcraft in general, and leave a like on the video if you did like this. You can catch me streaming live at twitch.tv/Shodarek, or if you ever need to ask me questions or anything about coaching, you can also join my Discord, which will be in the description below the video. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.